Martin Scorsese is considered to be the best director of his time. With his new film, Killers of the Flower Moon, out in theaters, I'd like to go back and revisit his filmography. His first film came out in 1967. It was called Who's That Knocking at My Door, and it starred longtime collaborator Harvey Keitel. His second film was Boxcar Bertha, which was released in 1972. A year later, he made Mean Streets, the first of his films to delve into the world of the mafia and the first of his films to star Robert De Niro. When you ask people about Martin Scorsese's early work, this is one of the first films that comes to most people's mind. In 1974, he released Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, starring Ellen Burstyn, Harvey Keitel, and a young Jodie Foster. This film netted Ellen Burstyn the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance as Alice. Ellen couldn't accept the award, so Marty accepted the award in her stead. It would be a long time before he would be accepted back up on that stage. 1976, he made Taxi Driver, one of the most important and iconic films of the 70s. Starring Robert De Niro as the infamous Travis Bickle, the film delves deep into his psyche of a former vet turned taxi driver as he gets disgusted with the city around him. Written by Paul Schrader, who Marty would continue to work with in the future. A year later, he made New York, New York, the romantic musical set in, you guessed it, New York. The film starts right as World War II has ended. Robert De Niro plays Jimmy Doyle, a saxophone player who meets Francine Ellis, a returning USO singer played by Liza Minnelli. The film chronicles their romance in New York. The film was not as well received, and when you stack it up against his filmography, it is on the lower side, but it still has its fans. Marty would take a few more years in between pictures, and that was time well spent. In 1980, he released Raging Bull, arguably the best movie of the 80s and definitely the greatest boxing movie of all time. Based off the real story of real-life boxer Jake LaMotta, written by Paul Schrader, it starred Robert De Niro, and it netted De Niro the Academy Award for Best Actor. It was well deserved. His performance as Jake LaMotta, in my opinion, is his greatest in his illustrious career. The film chronicles Jake inside the ring until he's a fat man running a bar. It also brought in Joe Pesci, who played his brother. The chemistry between the three men would impact cinema for years to come. 1982, he released King of Comedy, starring Robert De Niro again, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. De Niro plays Rupert Pumpkin, a man who's obsessed with TV personality Jerry Langford, played by Jerry Lewis. He imagines himself on his talk show, making it big in show business, but nobody can seem to remember his name, and he gets walked all over until he thinks of a plan to get on the air and to be remembered forever. Sound familiar? It should, because 2019's Joker took the same story and applied some clown makeup to it. Ironically, unlike Joker, which became the highest grossing rated R film ever, King of Comedy was a bomb at the box office and reviled by some critics. Entertainment Tonight called it the flop of the year, but today it gets the attention it deserves. After Hours was released in 1985. It stars Griffin Dunne as Paul Hackett, as he makes his way through New York City, and he realizes that he's somewhere that he shouldn't be. It's a fun, surreal film, and I really enjoy it. A year later, Scorsese made The Color of Money, a sort of sequel to The Hustler. It starred Paul Newman again as Fast Eddie, expert pool shark with hotshot Vincent played by Tom Cruise, who Eddie decides to take under his wing. It's an extremely fun film. I would say it's one of the best sports movies of all time. The Last Temptation of Christ was released in 1988. Starring Willem Dafoe as Jesus, he has to deal with various temptations. The film was very controversial when it came out. Christian groups denounced the film for its departure of scripture, and it put Scorsese in hot water for a couple of years. 1989, he worked with two of his friends, Woody Allen and Francis Ford Coppola, to make New York Stories. Each directed their own part. Scorsese was called Life Lessons. It starred Nick Nolte as Lionel, an artist, but as the saying goes, you can't bat 1,000. And I would say this is probably my least favorite of Scorsese's films. His next film would be mine and most people's favorite, Goodfellas. In my opinion, the greatest film of all time. I could watch it at any time. Everything about it is perfect. The acting, cinematography, mood, and music. It stars Ray Liotta as Henry Hill as he takes you behind the curtain of the mafia. Joe Pesci won Best Supporting Actor as Tommy DeVito, one of the most terrifying characters to ever be put on screen. Robert De Niro is equally as scary as Jimmy Burke. I have most of the soundtrack saved. One song in particular is Atlantis by Donovan. It's when Tommy kills Billy Bats and you realize that the good times are at an end.
Fucking break up my party.
And the other so-called gods of our legends, though gods they were, and as the elders of our time choose to remain blind,
Wait for 6 years.
Yeah.
let us rejoice and
I
let us
did my
sing
fucking
and
time,
dance.
Jimmy. I did my fucking
ring
time.
the
I
new
come home, and I want what I gotta get.
Hail
I got
Atlanta.
fucking mouths to feed. Understand? Yeah.
Get the dog!
next year, Scorsese released Cape Fear, a remake of the 1962 film. Nick Nolte played Sam Bowden, a lawyer who gets his client thrown in jail because he knows he's guilty. Robert De Niro plays the criminal Max Candy, and he wreaks havoc on Sam and his family for the duration of the film. If you were to watch a Scorsese film during Halloween, this is the one I'd recommend. Scorsese shifted tones with the 1993 film Age of Innocence. Daniel Day-Lewis plays a lawyer who is caught up in a love triangle between his fiancée, played by Winona Ryder, or the divorced countess, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. This interesting romance has the backdrop of 1870 New York. It is a great setting for the film. Marty would release Casino in 1995. It starred Robert De Niro as Ace Rothstein, a genius sports bettor. His best friend Nicky, played by Joe Pesci, is a vicious mob enforcer. It chronicles Ace's rise as a casino manager until he meets the love of his life, or so he thinks, the fiery Ginger, played by Sharon Stone. Some people complain that Scorsese was just bringing back the band and playing the hits. Well, if these songs are #1 hits, there's a reason for it, and Casino rocks. In 1997, Scorsese released Kundun. It would chronicle the 14th Dalai Lama's life. The boy playing the role is actually a relative of the Dalai Lama. Marty landed himself in hot water again because the Chinese government didn't like how Marty told the struggle of the people of Tibet. And because it was made by Disney, barely any theaters showed it. And it's not available on any streaming services. But I know one person who's a fan of it.
Marty! Kundun! I liked it!
1999, Marty would partner up with Paul Schrader again and release Bringing Out the Dead. Starring Nicolas Cage as a New York paramedic, you see him start to hallucinate and break down from the stress. One of Scorsese's lesser films, but this would be a crowning achievement for most other directors. In 2003, Scorsese would make Gangs of New York. This would be the first of his films to star Leonardo DiCaprio. He plays Amsterdam, a young man who wants to avenge his father's death. While Leo is the main character, Daniel Day-Lewis steals the film as Bill the Butcher, a dangerous gang leader who is basically Satan. Every time he's on screen, you're sweating. Cameron Diaz is also in this film, but the less said about her, the better. She needed to work more with her accent coach. A year later, he made The Aviator, the biopic about Howard Hughes, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Hughes. Cate Blanchett played famous actress Katharine Hepburn and won Best Actress for her performance. This is another one I don't enjoy, mainly because I can't stand the way everybody talks. It may be accurate for the time, but I don't know, it kind of gets on my nerves. 2006, Scorsese would make The Departed. It was a remake of the Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs, starring Leo as an undercover cop in the Irish mob and Matt Damon as a mole in the police department. Both of them are playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse, and in the middle is Jack Nicholson, a vicious mobster. This would be the film to finally get Marty his long-awaited Oscar. He finally won Best Director and Best Picture. His friends, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas, were there to greet him. Some would say it was a makeup Oscar, and you're damn right, he should have at least 3 Oscars for Best Director. 2010, he made Shutter Island, based off the novel by Dennis Lehane. A U.S. Marshal played by Leonardo DiCaprio is sent in with his partner, played by Mark Ruffalo. The two come to investigate a prison because one of the inmates has escaped. When Leo gets there, he realizes that something is deeply off with the prison. The film is very unnerving and will consistently have you on your toes. The next year, he would release Hugo. This would be the first Scorsese film I would watch, and I really enjoyed it. You can tell Scorsese has a deep admiration for silent films. And this is how I learned about A Trip to the Moon. Definitely Scorsese's most family-friendly film. His next film was not family-friendly. The Wolf of Wall Street was released in 2013. Leonardo DiCaprio would play Jordan Belfort, a slimy stockbroker who got rich selling people penny stocks. The film showed how Jordan accumulated his wealth while doing every drug possible. Nobody can forget Margot Robbie in her first feature film. Does the worst person you know idolize this movie? Probably, but that's not Marty's fault. It's one of the fastest and funniest 3-hour movies. 2016, he made Silence, starring Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, as 2 missionaries who travel to feudal Japan in search of their teacher, played by Liam Neeson. It didn't have a huge reception when it came out, but like many of his films, as the years have gone on, Silence has grown in appreciation. 2019, he would release The Irishman. This was truly bringing the band back together. He brought back Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Harvey Keitel, and first-timer Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa. The film is about Irishman Frank Sheeran and shows his life as a hitman for the mob. One of Scorsese's most personal films, I'd assume this is probably his last film that looks at the mafia. As I stated before, currently in theaters is Killers of the Flower Moon, a 3.5-hour-long epic starring Leo, De Niro, and Lily Gladstone. I want to say more, but I want you to go out and experience it for yourself. It's definitely worth the price of admission, and if the runtime gives you pause, I guarantee you that you've binged worse shows longer. I'm so grateful for all of Marty's work. He is the greatest living director ever, and you can make a strong case he made the greatest film in each decade, from the 70s to the 2020s. Hopefully he can get to 30 films before he retires. My name is Trevor Dunn, and thank you for watching.